Alrighty then, so let's continue our exploration of what's new in version 9. In fact, let's go take a look at the list. There are a lot of things to explore, and I don't think we'll cover them all here in this video, but let's start with the first one. So there's a side-by-side comparison mode for many of the filters where it's appropriate, meaning where it makes sense to do a side-by-side. So for instance, let's go into this, and I don't know, let's say we render initially something like brick texture. Let's do that, why not? And now I'm going to apply a filter, such as, for instance, the blur filter, Gaussian blur. And in the past, it would just apply it all over, right? But maybe we want to see it a little bit before and after. So we can click the side-by-side up here in the upper left. And you can see is that the left side of it is not subject to the change from that filter, whereas the right side is actually taking the whole effect. And so that way you can compare what's happening before and after. Now it's not showing the same image. This is the left half of the image and this is the right half of the image, but it's still going to be useful in many cases, and you can then click OK, and then that will apply it to the entire thing. So again, not all filters will do that, but let's say we want to do some color adjustments, or maybe here under adjust color, and again, when you see the side-by-side, that option here, you can make it so that it's only applying the color changes on one side and not the entire image. So that way you can see a little bit more in a sort of contrast or comparison between before applying the filter and after applying the filter, what will happen to it. Alright, so that's one feature. Let's go on to the next feature. This one here, PapiRay, of course, we've talked about this one a lot. This one is the new ray tracer. And in fact, we probably mentioned it a few times. This one here is a new ray tracer with soft shadows, global illumination, high quality anti-aliasing, and etc. Also supports rendering height maps. A little typo here, but the point is that you essentially work from an elevation map. In fact, we could use this image right here and say, okay, if it's darker, like these kind of reddish brick parts, this would be the lower parts, and the bright part, like the mortar here around the bricks, would be the higher elevation parts. And so if you use it that way, let's first of all store this image, because we'll want to really look at two ways of this. One is the coloring of it, right? There are some colors here. In fact, if we enhance the contrast or the dynamic range, we'll probably get a different appearance here, which is more of the elevation map. We could do perhaps a interactive undo here to go in between the two. But the idea is that you really have some pixels that are brighter, and they should represent a higher elevation. And then the pixels that are darker should be a lower elevation, regardless of what color. And so you have a color and you have an elevation map, a color map and an elevation map. If you think about it, these could be connected or they could be totally independent. I mean, you could have an elevation map like this one and then something totally different on the color map. Let's say, for instance, I don't know, render plasma noise. And even the color, like HSV, there you go. So we have very different colors here now. Let's go and image store that. And we see that right here. So this would be the color map, whereas this over here is the elevation map. And how do we put this into a 3D scene? Well, with PapiRay, we simply go to Filter and Transform and PapiRay. Now, PapiRay is going to look for both the color map and the elevation map. Where does it look for those? Well, the color map, it looks for in the swap buffer. And if you switch over there to the swap buffer, if you jump to the swap buffer, you see that that one's usually just white. So it's not actually seeing much there, and it's going to simply use that and then apply its shading based on the elevation map, which it grabs over here. So this one's actually going to be in the main buffer. The main buffer has the elevation, the swap buffer has the color. Alright, so let's put the color in there. In fact, this time I'm going to put this color in there and then switch back to the main buffer. And I don't think I did that right. Let's see, do I have it? Which one am I looking at? This is a swap buffer. Let's go switch back. Okay, now I'm on the main buffer. Oh, looks like I actually have it in both, of course. All right, so now I'm going to put this one in here, and I now have the elevation map in the main buffer. Again, if I combine the two, if I click on here to see them both, actually this one here, you can see indeed that there is a coloring in the background, and that's in the swap buffer. All right, let's go to PapiRay and render that into 3D. Transform PapiRay. There you go. And we can navigate around here, and we can see that there is indeed some color changes, and perhaps we can, I don't know, look at it from different angles from the top, zoom back a little bit. Let's see over here, and move the camera vantage point. So there's all sorts of fun stuff to do with that. But of course, this can be really useful for pretty interesting 3D renderings. Just one example, let's go do that. Let's go render, you've seen us do this a few times. Let's go render the plasma noise, and hold on a second. Alright, so we're going to render something without the colors, just like that. Alright, and then we'll do something like adjusting, there, curves. And what I'll do is I'll create sort of a plateau. So there are kind of like a mesa or a Grand Canyon plateau, and then it's going to come down, but it's going to have another generation of plateau here, and then another one, and at the very end it's got the river, the Colorado River at the very bottom. And so that's what we can do to kind of simulate that, going into stairs along that elevation. And so this is an elevation map, this is not the color map, but it's actually going to look pretty good already at that level. Let's go and store that in case we want to work with that, and let's go destroy this one, and this one we don't need these anymore. Alright, so if this is now an elevation map, then we can simply go and turn it into, before we do that, let's go switch over. I want to clear that. Let's get rid of the color maps we had there and simply go back to the main buffer there. So the swap buffer is now plain white, and we can go render, transform, PapiRay, and there it is. Alright, so now here we have perhaps, we need to be a little bit closer to that. Man, this is a very bright area here now. Let's reduce the brightness a little bit. Select the light source to be back there. Add some global illumination, and do a quick render of that. Let's make it a little bit better quality, medium or high quality, and render. Alright, so this is just a quick one, just to get an idea of how this works, right? So you got an elevation map. The brighter the parts are, the higher elevation they will produce. And from here you can do all sorts of things. You can paint a path, a canyon, you can paint some erosion effects on it. You can do all sorts of things that will make it more and more sophisticated. Alright, so that's one new feature, PapiRay. I would say that's the new feature of version 9, although this one was not added first. The first one was the side-by-side mode. And then so PapiRay came along, and this, by the way, as of this recording, does not work on the Windows XP, as we found out, and what we need to do is hope that maybe it will at some point, or that nobody uses XP anymore. Who knows? I still use Windows XP on one of my systems, so it would be nice to get it there, but it's a tough one, because we really are writing the code to be accelerated through the GPU, and you just can't do that on Windows XP. So in the meantime, let's move on here. To allow custom brush transform option, it now has a button on the context strip for easy access. What does that mean? Well, let's go back to the program here. Let's say we pick a portion up as a custom brush. Right, let's say we use the custom brush tool here and pick up this area here. So now we've picked that up, we can see it as a custom brush image, semi-transparent. Let's make it fully opaque. There it is. Alright, so this custom brush, if I'm painting, it's not going to change size with the pressure, it's not going to change rotational angle with the direction in which I'm painting, because by default it's disabled. And we could go to the settings here for the brush, and under the custom brush specifically click this button to allow custom brush transform. Why is this not enabled by default? Well, probably because it used to be really slow on slow machines, on slow computers. But nowadays computers are fast enough, we can actually afford to make this a little bit more common ground or commonly enabled. So what we do is we enabled this shortcut right up here. This is the shortcut that will do the same thing as clicking this box. In fact, if we put them side by side, as you check this, you can see that this works the same way. And so what that does is that basically allows you to, for instance, follow the angle, and as you rotate it now, as you move the cursor around, it's changing the angle of the image. Or it might be based on the speed at which you're painting, that is changing the speed, the size of it too. And so you see here, if I'm going to go really fast, let's go random size or speed scale, there you go, you can produce a very small image, and as I slow down it gets bigger. That kind of on-the-fly scaling and rotation is something that takes some significant amount of computation. It used to be slow, and on slower computers we just didn't want to enable that by default unless you knew you could afford it because you had a faster computer. Now it's a little bit more common to do that, so we make this TR, transform, enable, or toggle available for very quick access. And that's really handy if you want to enable that on images that are in your brushes. I mean, even something like the hot dog, if you want to enable the transform on that and perhaps enable the speed scale on it, you'll see that the size of this hot dog will be drastically different depending on how fast you paint. This will also apply, of course, to brushes such as the new stickers. Where are they? Right here. And so for instance the sun, if you go slowly and fast, you may want to change the size with the speed scale, and so here you go. Now you have a lot of different sizes automatically produced. And same thing with the rotation. If you click this option or this one here, right, that's the angle control. Based on the angle of your path, it's going to rotate the sun and it's going to go line up with that path. Alright, so that's the shortcut. Let's go read that again. Now it makes sense, right? The allow custom brush transform option now has an option, a button on the context strip. This is what we call the context bar or the context strip. This is below the menu bar. This is the menu bar with the menus, and then here's a context bar or the context strip. This one is depending on the context, and typically the context means which tool you're currently using. So you select a tool, and as a function of that, the context will be changing. And some of them even introduce a second context, like the curve tool here does. Alright, so that was that feature. Let's get one more for this video, and then we'll call it a day. Let's see, so we did this one. So okay, faster switching between different media, startup and various function. Boy, that one I can't really demonstrate. It's just internal code optimized and things go faster. You'll probably notice it as you do your stuff and work with it if you have used it in earlier versions in the past. Improved international support. Let's talk about this one just very briefly. You know, if you're running on Windows 7 or 8, let's say the French version, or some other international version, and you're using the custom, let's say the particle brushes here, for instance. See, these particle brushes, they have a lot of numbers, and well, I happen to be on a French version of the OS, and so I can actually see sometimes those decimal points or values will actually be you know, a period to separate the integer part from the fractional part, but on many OSs it will be a comma. And so we now process that a little bit better. When you enable particles, that's a really key thing too, by the way, because you need to be able to enter numbers that sometimes, like this one here, has a 4,5, meaning really 4.5. So whether you enter it as 2.3, oh, let's go and enable this. These parameters will have a significant impact on what the appearance of the brush is. And so you definitely want to be able to enter those regardless of which version of Windows you're running. So that's a new feature too. We've simply made it a little bit more universally supported. Loading brush images no longer defaults to Targa only. Okay, so that was probably down here on the brush image or open, where you could go and open an image, and it was defaulted to Targa. By default here, it would essentially have default Targa, right? So it would look only for Targa TGA files. If you didn't have any TGA files, like I have in this case in this folder, there just wouldn't be anything showing. Even though you knew you had some PNG files and bitmaps, BMPs and JPEGs and so on, you wouldn't see them because it was filtering to look only for .tga files or Targa files. So this was changed now to allow looking for what they call automatic 60+ formats. This is thanks to some ImageMagick file conversion. And so when you decide you want to load this elephant here, for instance, it's actually converting that to a Targa and then loads it into our native format. And you can see now things work nicely together. All right, so that's a new feature too. Basically, when you load brush images, it's not defaulting to just looking for Targa, which means really it's looking for just any image format out there that it supports. All right, do we have time for one more? Okay, this one here. The paper panel now has more papers option. Okay, paper panel. Where do we find paper panel? Well, up here in the upper right where the previews are, you'll notice that there is a preview of the current image. That's the current brush image. And then there's on the right side the current painted image, or like your image buffer. Right? If I clear it, you'll see now it's clear. The brush image is still here. That's our little trusty elephant here. All right, well, in between the two, there's paper brushes, right? Paper texture on, off. You can turn that on. And let's see actually what's happening. Let's use a regular brush to see that. Let's go with airbrush, fairly large one, so we see it well. And let's use a color that's kind of a lightish green. There you go. All right, so let's paint with that without the paper texture enabled. And now click here and you see the little triangle up here in the upper left corner, and now that means the paper texture is enabled. Which paper texture? Well, you can see the paper texture choices in a couple of ways. One is you right click on that same tool. Oh, no, that's not there anymore. Okay, well, the other way is in the context bar you can see heap papers right there. Another place I think you can still do it here somewhere. There's probably some paper. Well, there's a couple of places. Fill settings, you could see the patterns. Nah, that's not the paper, is it? Alright, so let's ignore that. But I seem to remember there was also some other utilities or some other places here. Anyway, we don't need to go look for that because we've got it right here. Whenever you do something that involves paper, you can see the papers right there. Alright, so the papers, there's a couple of paper textures that are included in the program. So as you're painting, you see it this way, you click another one, you see it that way, click another one, you see it this way, maybe some dinosaur skin or stucco or some rocks, some other type of formations here. And then at some point you run out of ideas and you say, wait, I want to create my own, I want to load my own. Well, now you can. Here's the more papers. Right, so with this, you'll be able to load other images as papers. And in fact, it first goes to the patterns. And in the patterns area, you could say, let's use the brick pattern, but not as an image, simply as a paper texture. Because you can use that as either the brush image or as the paper texture. So let's go do that. And as you select it, now you have the bricks showing through as the texture. Right, so if you have another one, maybe those flowery things, that's odd. This one here, cool. Okay, so we get the idea. This is basically where you can see more papers. There's also whatever is in your current brush, and then of course load, which means let's go load it from a image file. By default, it looks for JPEGs. It could be for bitmap. We actually have in this folder nothing like that. It's just PNGs, if I recall, and so nothing will show here. But that's basically the idea. Is you have more options to load your own papers.